All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving right into the core of, what really pushes your English skills forward. We've been digging deep, looking at tons of different sources and materials, and it's really become super clear that, when you're working on leveling up your English, there's one element that just kind of rises above all the rest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for those of you listening, actively working on your English, we've designed this whole deep dive to be that kind of aha moment, that click,
Yeah.
where it all kind of comes together. And, we're not going to be throwing, a million different strategies at you. Instead, we're going to be laser focused on the most impactful factor in this whole journey of yours towards fluency.
And this is where it gets, really interesting because, the secret sauce, the key to unlocking that significant progress is consistency.
You got it.
Now, you might be thinking, like, consistency, that sounds that sounds pretty straightforward.
Right.
And you know what? You're right. It is simple, but the power of it is just immense, and it's often overlooked. It's like this surprising but remarkably effective engine that drives language learning.
Yeah. And our goal in this deep dive is kind of twofold.
Mhm.
First, we want to explore why consistency is so important. Like, what are the underlying principles that make, regular effort just so much more effective than these sporadic bursts of, intense studying. And second, we're going to give you some really practical, real-world ways to make consistency just a natural part of your life.
Yeah, I love that. So let's dive into that why. Why consistency is the champion.
Wow.
And all of our sources were so emphatic about this, starting with how it builds long-term memory. And I mean, this makes intuitive sense, right? The more you encounter something, the more it sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really cool is how consistent, even brief exposure to the language, it really leverages your brain's natural mechanisms for long-term retention.
Yeah.
Think about it. You can cram for an exam, right? You can memorize a whole bunch of stuff, but it often fades pretty quickly.
Right.
But consistent engagement, that's what helps the knowledge become deeply embedded. It's almost like, how you remember your native language, right? You don't have to put in constant effort to remember it.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's not just about passively taking in the information.
Right.
Regular practice really actively builds your confidence when you speak. There's this huge difference between understanding English and actually feeling comfortable speaking it on the fly, and that can feel like a massive hurdle for a lot of learners.
You're so right. It's a really great point. And the more consistently you practice speaking, the more it just becomes this automatic thing, right?
Yeah.
It goes from being this kind of deliberate, sometimes nerve-wracking task to, it becomes this more natural, comfortable way of expressing yourself.
Yeah.
And the steady practice, this is what helps to chip away at that fear of making mistakes. That fear that so many learners, they wrestle with.
And that's really where the long game comes in. And we're not talking about, instantaneously becoming fluent. The sources are very clear on this. Real fluency takes time. We're talking months. We're talking years even.
Yeah.
It's the compounding effect of those small, consistent actions that lead to huge fluency gains down the line.
That's it. Think about it like building any other skill, right? Whether it's playing an instrument or learning a new sport, consistent practice, even if it's just a little bit every day, it compounds, it adds up over time, and then boom, you see amazing results.
Yeah. And a crucial point is that daily engagement with English, it really helps to kind of normalize making mistakes.
Yeah.
Because, that fear of getting things wrong can be so paralyzing. But when you're constantly using the language, those little errors, they just become part of the process, right? They become part of the learning journey.
Yeah.
Nothing to be ashamed of. And the sources are really clear about this. Progress may not always be, immediately apparent, but it's happening.
Right? It's happening under the surface. And that's a really vital shift in mindset. Instead of looking at mistakes as these failures, consistency allows you to reframe them, to see them as valuable feedback, as necessary steps on the path to getting better. It's all about embracing the journey, knowing that consistent effort, that's what gets you to fluency.
I love that. So we're crystal clear on the why, right? Consistency, why it's so important. Now let's get to the how. How do you actually weave English into your day-to-day life? And the sources had some really practical tips on this, on how to make English a consistent habit.
Yeah. And what's interesting here is that the emphasis is all about integrating English into your existing routine, right?
Mm.
Not trying to create this whole new overwhelming like thing you have to do. The key is to find those small manageable chunks of time that you can realistically dedicate to English each day.
Right, right. It's not about, suddenly discovering 2 extra hours in your day, which good luck, right? But the sweet spot seems to be, those shorter, more frequent sessions. Even just 15, 20, 30 minutes
Yeah.
of focused time with English can make a huge difference. And think about it.
Yeah.
There are probably moments in your day that are kind of underutilized,
Mm.
little pockets of time.
Yeah, and the sources give some really great concrete examples. Like if you have a commute, listening to English podcasts or audiobooks, boom,
Yeah.
you've just turned that travel time into learning time,
Yeah.
right? And same with doing chores around the house.
Yeah.
You put on something in English, you're getting that passive exposure, but it's so valuable.
Totally, totally. And, lunch breaks? How often are we just like scrolling on our phones, right? What if instead of doing that, you watched a quick English language video or a TED Talk on something you're interested in?
Exactly.
It's a small change, but over time, that learning really adds up.
Yeah, and then there's incorporating English into your evening routine. Just reading a short article or a few pages of a book in English before bed. That can be a really relaxing and effective way to kind of wind down and engage with the language at the same time.
Oh, yeah. And we can't forget actively speaking.
Mhm.
Even just 5, 10 minutes of speaking practice, it can be talking to yourself, just about your day, or even connecting with, a language partner online.
Right.
All of those little things contribute. The main idea, the main principle from the sources is small actions, but done consistently.
Yeah, it's all about building momentum. When you start with those small, achievable steps, it makes it so much less intimidating. And it really increases the chances that you're going to stick with it, over the long haul. It's that consistent effort, that drip, 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 that eventually fills the reservoir of your English skill.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so important to remember that everyone learns a bit differently. And that's where having a personalized plan comes in. And the sources really encourage you, the listener, to think about, your individual learning needs, what you like.
Yeah, totally. Because what motivates one person may not work for another. It's all about finding the approach that matches your interests, your learning style, and even just like how much time you have.
Right. And to help you with this whole personalization thing, the sources had some really great questions, for you to ask yourself, like, what English skills do you want to focus on improving right now? Is it speaking more fluently? Is it understanding what you hear better? Is it writing or maybe your grammar?
Yeah, great questions. And then thinking about, what kind of resources do you actually enjoy? Are you a bookworm? Are you, someone who loves movies and TV shows? Do you like podcasts? Or maybe you prefer, something more interactive, like a language learning app. Because when you leverage those natural inclinations, practice becomes so much more enjoyable. And as a result, you're more likely to keep doing it.
So true. And then finally, thinking about the practicalities of, your daily life, when can you actually realistically fit in some English practice? Is it first thing in the morning before things get crazy? Is it during your lunch break? In the evening after work? Or even on your commute, when you build a plan that really fits into your existing routine, consistency becomes so much easier.
Yeah, if we tie that back to our main point, having a personalized plan, it just reduces the friction. When you're choosing things you actually like to do and scheduling practice for a time that works,
Yeah.
you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
You're making it more likely that you'll be consistent.
Definitely. Now, speaking of things that a lot of learners find, challenging, speaking English is often at the top of that list.
Yeah.
But the sources had some really good advice about how important it is to practice speaking every day,
Right.
even if you don't have a native English speaker to practice with right there next to you.
Yeah. What's really cool here is the idea of actually using your speaking skills, even
Yeah.
when you're by yourself. It's about training your mouth, your mind, to get used to forming those words and sentences.
Exactly. I mean, I know talking to yourself might feel a little weird at first.
Right.
But describing your day, talking through your plans, even just narrating what's going on around you, it's all super valuable practice. It gets your vocal cords working, and it helps you think directly in English, without translating in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, and the suggestion to record yourself is a great one. It gives you this unique opportunity to really assess yourself. You can listen back and pinpoint areas you might want to work on, like your
Hmm.
pronunciation or how you structure your sentences.
Oh, for sure. And of course, connecting with a speaking partner if you can, whether that's online or a friend, it's super beneficial.
Yeah,
But the main message, the takeaway here is you don't have to wait for that perfect speaking partner to start practicing.
right. Get started today.
You can start today, and the sources really emphasize that consistent speaking, it just accelerates your progress, both in how confident you feel and your overall fluency.
It does. It's about actively putting those language skills to use, not just, learning them in the abstract.
Exactly, yeah. And now let's talk about something that's, a little more internal thinking in English.
Sure.
And the sources were pretty clear on this. They explained why that constant back and forth translating between your native language and English, that can really slow down your progress in the long run.
Yeah, it's true. Because translating adds this extra step. It's like this mental gymnastics routine.
Right.
But when you consciously train yourself to think in English, you streamline everything. Right?
Yeah.
You understand things better, you can respond faster, and it just feels more natural. English starts to feel less like this foreign code you're trying to crack and more like a part of you.
Yeah, yeah, and the tips they gave were so simple but effective. Things like,
Wow.
describing the things around you in English or even just starting to make your to-do lists in English.
It's amazing how these small changes can make a big difference over time. Like even just writing your shopping list in English,
Yeah.
that forces you to use English vocabulary in a really practical way.
Right, right. And the idea of asking yourself questions throughout the day in English and then answering them in English,
Yeah, love
it's
them.
like you're having this inner dialogue
You are?
that just reinforces your ability to form thoughts in the language. And the sources really highlighted that this leads to a much more automatic understanding and use of English.
It's all about making that direct connection in your brain between, the idea and the English word for it. You cut out that middleman, the translation step.
I love that. And another super powerful way to boost your English without feeling like you're constantly studying is to surround yourself with the language. Really create that immersive environment.
Immersion is so effective because you're constantly exposed to English in so many different real-world situations. It's almost like you're absorbing it through your pores.
Yeah, totally. And the sources had a ton of examples of this, like watching English TV shows and movies,
Love it.
maybe starting with subtitles and then gradually trying to watch with fewer subtitles or even no subtitles.
Right.
Or listening to music, podcasts. Make that part of your daily routine.
Yeah. And it's not just about listening and watching. Reading books, blogs, articles in English
Right.
about things you're actually interested in that makes it so much more engaging.
Totally. And then there's writing in English, which is often overlooked, but it's so helpful.
It is.
Even if it's just, a short journal entry or a social media post or as we talked about, your to-do list.
Yeah. Yeah. All those little things help.
All those little writing activities really contribute to that immersive experience. And the main point here is that consistency, consistent immersion, it helps you learn almost subconsciously.
Exactly. You're making English this constant presence in your life.
Right.
So it becomes more and more familiar. It doesn't feel like this foreign language you have to struggle with.
I love that. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about staying motivated. Motivation can go up and down, It's not always going to be there.
It's true.
But the sources talked about how important it is to track your progress, to keep that motivation going strong.
Yeah. This is so crucial
Yeah.
because when you can actually see the progress you're making, it gives you a huge boost.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And it just encourages you to keep going.
Yeah. And the ways they recommend tracking are really easy to do, like using a habit tracker.
Yeah. Love those.
Just to mark off the days that you do some kind of English practice. It's so
Yeah,
visual.
it is. And keeping a journal, writing down new words and phrases that you're learning, that not only helps you remember them, but it also allows you to look back and see how much you've learned,
Yeah.
how much you've accomplished.
And if you're working on speaking, the idea of recording yourself periodically and then listening back to those recordings,
Oh.
that's a fantastic way to actually hear your improvement because sometimes it's hard to notice those little changes day to day.
It's true. But when you have that objective proof, when you can hear how much better you're getting, that's incredibly motivating.
Yeah.
It shows you that your effort is paying off.
For sure. So bringing it all back together, the big takeaway, the central message from all of our sources is this. Getting really good at English, it isn't about chasing the newest learning hack or trying every new method out there. The key is consistency.
You nailed it. consistent practice, even in small bits, speaking regularly, immersing yourself in the language, and
Well,
keeping track of how you're doing. Those are the pillars, the foundation of long-term success.
absolutely. And we really want to encourage you, the listener, to take one small step today towards making consistency a part of your English journey. Commit to one tiny English-related thing right now. Maybe listen to a short English news clip, write a couple of sentences about your day, or just practice describing something you see around you for a minute or two. Anything.
Right. Remember, the real impact, it doesn't come from how intensely you study in any one sitting. It comes from how often you engage with English over time. It's
Yeah.
about making it this consistent, enjoyable part of your life.
So true, so true. So here's a final thought to leave you with. What's one small, enjoyable way you can make English a regular part of your life starting right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Think about that.
All right, until next time. See you then. Bye.